On June 6, 2024, something concerning surfaced on a Russian-speaking hacking forum called XSS. A threat actor, using the handle Encrino, posted an advertisement that caught the attention of security researchers. The post was offering a zero-day exploit for sale, and the target was Telegram, specifically the Android version of the popular messaging app ESET. Researcher Lukasz Stefanko came across this advertisement and began investigating. The seller claimed the exploit worked against Telegram version 10.144 and older. Encrino did not publicly list a price. Instead, the transaction would happen privately, which is typical for high-value exploits in these underground marketplaces. What made this discovery particularly interesting was how Stefanko managed to get his hands on the actual exploit. The seller had included screenshots and a video demonstrating the exploit in action. Even more revealing, the demonstration pointed to a public Telegram channel, where a proof of concept had been shared. By locating that channel, the researcher was able to retrieve the malicious payload itself. This was a significant break. Having access to the actual payload meant ESET could analyze exactly how the exploit worked, rather than relying solely on claims made in a forum post. The investigation revealed that this was no empty sales pitch. The exploit was real, and it was dangerous for regular Telegram users. This discovery highlights an uncomfortable reality about modern cybercrime. Zero-day vulnerabilities are bought and sold openly in these underground forums, often before the software vendor even knows a flaw exists. In this case, threat actors had at least 5 weeks to potentially exploit the vulnerability before Telegram released a patch. So how did this exploit actually work under the hood? The technical mechanics of Evil Video reveal a clever abuse of how Telegram handles media files. At its core, the vulnerability exploited the Telegram API, which is the same interface that developers use to build bots and automated tools for the platform. Through this API, attackers could programmatically upload files that were specially crafted to trick the Android app into misidentifying what it was receiving. Here is where it gets interesting. A normal Android application package or API file should appear in Telegram as a binary attachment, something you would have to deliberately tap to download and install. But the attackers found a way to make these malicious API files show up instead as embedded video previews. Specifically, the payload would display as a 30-second video clip right in the chat, complete with a thumbnail and playback controls that looked completely legitimate. The deception worked because the Android client was parsing these specially crafted files in a way that prioritized the media preview functionality over proper file type validation. When a user received one of these poisoned messages, the malicious file would often download automatically if they had the default media download settings enabled. Even users who had disabled auto downloads were not entirely safe, because the preview still looked like a harmless video. If someone tried to play the fake video, Telegram would show an error message saying it could not play the file and suggest using an external player. Tapping that open button is exactly what the attackers wanted. That action would prompt the user to install what they thought was a video player, but was actually the malicious app in disguise. Now here is the crucial detail about version numbers. This exploit only worked on Telegram for Android versions 10.144 and older. The vulnerability had been patched by version 10.145. The reason those older versions were vulnerable comes down to how they handled file type detection and media preview. Rendering newer versions added proper validation that the older releases lacked, and there is an important distinction here. Telegram's web client and desktop applications were never affected by this trick. Those platforms correctly identified the payload as an MP4 video file and treated it accordingly without the dangerous preview behavior. The vulnerability was specific to the Android app's implementation, which processed these files differently and created the opening that attackers exploited. Let us walk through exactly what happens when someone falls victim to this attack. The whole thing starts innocently enough. A user opens a Telegram chat or channel where a malicious file has been shared, because Telegram has automatic media downloads enabled by default. The payload arrives on the device the moment that conversation opens. Most people never even think to change this setting. For those who have disabled auto-download, a single tap on the video preview is enough to bring the file onto their phone. Now, here is where the deception kicks in. The malicious file appears to be a 30-second video clip. It looks completely normal sitting there in the chat. But when the user tries to play it, Telegram displays an error message saying the video cannot be played. The message helpfully suggests using an external video player instead. This is all part of the trap. If the user taps the open button in that error message, things escalate quickly. They are prompted to install what appears to be an external player application, but this is actually a malicious app.exe file. The malware samples researchers found on VirusTotal were cleverly disguised as legitimate apps. Some pretended to be a vast antivirus. Others claimed to be a premium mod for an adult content platform. Nothing about the file names would raise suspicion for most users. There is one final hurdle. The attackers need to clear Android devices. Normally block installation of apps from unknown sources as a security measure, so the victim must manually enable this permission in their device settings. The prompt guides them through it. Once they flip that switch and proceed with the installation, the compromise is complete. Behind the scenes, the malware reaches out to its command and control server, located at InfinityHackSharon DDNS.net. From that point on, the attackers have a foothold on the device. The disclosure timeline for this vulnerability tells an interesting story about how security research and vendor response actually work in practice. Researchers first reported the evil video vulnerability to Telegram on June 26, 2024. That was about 3 weeks after the exploit had been advertised for sale on the underground forum. But here is where things get frustrating. Telegram did not respond to that initial report, so ESET waited, and when there was still no word from Telegram, they reached out again on July 4. This time, Telegram responded the same day, confirming that their team was investigating the issue. It is not entirely clear why the first report went unanswered, but the important thing is that once Telegram engaged, they moved fairly quickly. They released version 10.145 on July 11, just 1 week after confirming they were working on a fix. But let us zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Here, the exploit was first advertised for sale on June 6. The patch did not arrive until July 11. That means threat actors had at least 5 weeks where this vulnerability was potentially exploitable in the wild. 5 weeks is a long time in the world of 0 days. That is 5 weeks where anyone who purchased the exploit could have been using it against real Telegram users. We do not know for certain whether the vulnerability was actively exploited during that window. ESET did find evidence of malicious payloads associated with this exploit, including fake apps pretending to be legitimate software. But what we can say is that the window of exposure was substantial. The responsible disclosure process worked eventually, but the gap between discovery and fix left users vulnerable for an extended period. For users, this timeline underscores something important. When a 0-day is being sold on underground markets, the clock starts ticking well before most users even know there is a problem staying updated with the latest app versions becomes critical, because by the time a patch lands, the vulnerability may have been in circulation for weeks. But there was another vulnerability discovered around the same time, and this one might be even more alarming. A researcher named Michael Deplant, who goes by the handle Izabashi Online, found a completely separate 0-day flaw in Telegram. The findings were reported by 3Side, and they paint a troubling picture. This vulnerability received a CVSS score of 9.8 out of 10 for context. That is about as high as these scores go. The vulnerability was assigned the identifier ZDI CAN 30207, and what makes it particularly dangerous is how it checks virtually every box for severity. It can be exploited remotely over a network, meaning an attacker does not need physical access to a device. It requires no user action at all, so there is nothing the victim needs to click or download. It is not considered difficult to exploit, and it affects the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data, which is the trifecta security professionals worry about most, according to experts who analyzed this flaw. It could potentially compromise any Telegram account. Think about what that means. An attacker could gain access to private conversations, files, contacts, and everything else tied to a user's presence on the platform. And because no user interaction is required, the victim would have no idea anything was happening until it was already too late. The disclosure process for this vulnerability follows a different path than what we saw with Evil Video. Telegram has up to 120 days to address the issue under standard disclosure timelines, though given the critical nature of the flaw, a patch could arrive sooner for users. This serves as another reminder of why keeping software updated matters. Strong passwords, two-factor authentication, and general vigilance about suspicious activity remain the best defenses while waiting for fixes to roll out. Now let us talk about what you can actually do to protect yourself. The most important step is updating your Telegram app. If you are using Android, make sure you have version 10.145 or later installed. This update contains the patch that fixes the Evil Video vulnerability, so anything older leaves you exposed. You can check your version number in the app settings under the About section. Beyond updating, there are some practical habits worth adopting. Automatic media downloads are enabled by default in Telegram, which means malicious files can land on your device. The moment you open a conversation, you should consider turning this feature off. Head into the Settings menu, find the Data and Storage section, and disable automatic downloads. This gives you control over what actually reaches your device. Two-factor authentication is another layer worth adding. Even if someone manages to compromise your session, they would still need that second factor to take over your account. Completely pair this with a strong, unique password, and you significantly raise the barrier for attackers. Here is a red flag to watch for. If you tap on a video and Telegram tells you it cannot play the file, suggesting you use an external player, instead, stop right there. That behavior is exactly what the Evil Video exploit triggered. Do not tap open or try to install anything suggested by the error message. For those who want to be thorough, you can scan your device using a mobile security suite. The malicious files would be hiding in specific locations. Check your internal storage at the path storage. Emulated 0 Telegram video. If you use an SD card, look at storage followed by your SD card ID. Then Telegram video. Running a security scan on these directories can help you find anything suspicious that might have already made it onto your phone.